Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we will see part 2 for core Java interview questions and answers. I have already covered few basic questions for core Java in part 1. So if you in case you missed that, please go and check out from the top right corner. And for any other Java related tutorials, please do check out my channel. In this video, we will be covering 15 questions with their detailed answers. The level of difficulty in this part will be a little bit higher from the previous video. So without any further delay, let's start. So the first question can come to you is how final method is different from abstract method in Java. So your answer should be like abstract method is used to achieve the abstraction, but final is actually used to restrict the access of member. Also, abstract methods can never be declared as final because they are supposed to be overridden by a subclass for providing the implementation of those. Next, interviewer can ask you for an example of a runtime polymorphism. So you can give this specific example which is written over here. So here we have a parent class vehicle which is having a method display which is just printing have tires, and then we have a specialized class car which is extending vehicle and overriding its display method and printing it has 4 tires. So here you can see in the main method we have created a reference of vehicle refer to the instance of car class. So what will happen at the compile time, it will check if there is a display method available in the vehicle class which is there, so it will compile successfully. But what will happen at the runtime, it will check if car has overridden the display method, and then that overridden method will be called. And in case car has not overridden the display method, then in this case the display method of vehicle will be called. So in our case we can see the car class has already overridden the display method, so the output will be have 4 tires. So this is how you can give an example of runtime polymorphism, because binding of the method happened at the runtime. By continuing with the OOPS concepts, interviewer can ask you like, can we create object of abstract class in Java? So the answer to that will be no. The abstract class can never be instantiated, even if it contains a constructor and all of its methods are implemented. If it is declared as abstract class, it cannot be instantiated. Abstract means it is incomplete. This is also an important question, like what is a JIT compiler in Java? So it is a runtime environment component in JVM used to improve the performance. It compiles the bytecode into native machine code at the runtime. Then JVM call the compiled code of that method directly instead of interpreting it. In case of JIT compiler, the often used methods are compiled soon after the JVM has started, and less used methods are compiled much later or not at all, depending on how many times they are being called. So just to summarize, you can mention that JIT compiler is mainly used to enhance the performance of Java application at the runtime by compiling the bytecode into native machine code. This is also an important question, like what is immutable in Java and why string is immutable. So first you need to explain what exactly is immutable. So in Java, when we create an object of an immutable class, we cannot change its value. The next part of question is why string is immutable. So we all know string is immutable, but why it was made immutable? The string objects are actually cached in string pool and can be accessed from the multiple locations. So there is always a risk that one can change the string value, which will affect the other referring to the same string. So there is a pool of strings where one string literal is there, and it is possible that multiple references are pointing to that specific string literal. So if one of them is able to change it, that will also impact the other references which are pointing to that. So due to that reason, string was made immutable. So the follow-up question to that will be how you can create your own custom class immutable. So there are few steps that you need to take to make your own class immutable. The first one will be you need to make your class final so that it cannot be extended by any child class. After that, you need to make all the fields private and final so that direct access outside the class is not allowed, and also it cannot be changed after once it has been assigned a value. The next will be you don't need to provide the setter methods for the variable, only the getter method will be available. How we can initialize the final and private variables? Initialization of all the fields via constructor by performing the deep copy. Perform cloning of objects in the getter method to return a copy rather than returning the actual object reference. So by following these steps, we can make our custom class immutable as well. Next question is, what is a marker interface in Java? A marker interface is an interface that has no methods or constants inside it. It provides runtime type information about the object so that compiler and JVM have additional information about the object. Java has many built-in marker interface such as serializable or clonable. So let's take an example of clonable interface. So this is how the clonable interface actually looks like. It is nothing but public interface clonable and nothing inside that. If we try to clone an object that does not implement this specific interface, the JVM throws clone not supported exception. Hence, the clonable marker interface is an indicator to the JVM that we can call object.clone method on a specific object. This is also a very tricky question because we all know the finally block is available in try catch finally for the exception handling in Java. So we all know that finally block gets executed every time. So the question can come to you, does finally block always execute in Java? In almost all the cases, finally will be executed if there is an exception or no exception. But there are two cases when even finally will also not be executed. So first one is if somewhere in your code itself you have called system.exit function. So during that time finally will not be called. And second is when your system is crashed, at that time also finally will not be called. Next is, what is static import in Java? So using static import, we can access any static member of a class without specifying the class name itself. So currently how we are accessing a static member, suppose we have a class A and its member is ID, and if we want to access ID, we will be accessing it a.id. If we use static import in the current class, then we can directly access the ID member without even using class name A. So what is the syntax of static import? With all the other import statements, we need to mention import static, the complete package of the A class, and after that we can directly access the ID variable. This is also another important question from exception handling, which is what is the difference between checked and unchecked exceptions? So the checked exceptions are the ones which are checked at the compile time. For example, SQL exception. So you will not be able to compile the code unless you handle these exceptions at the compile time itself. And the unchecked exceptions are the ones which are handled at runtime because they cannot be checked at the compile time. For example, there is arithmetic exception or null pointer exception. So the example of arithmetic exception is divisible by 0. So suppose you are dividing two variables. So the compiler will not be able to know at the compile time whether the denominator will be 0 and it could result into arithmetic exception. So that is why if any denominator comes 0 at the runtime itself, then arithmetic exception will be raised, and as they cannot be checked at the compile time, that is why they are known as unchecked exceptions. This is another tricky question from exception handling. So is it possible to have a try block without catch block in Java? So answer to that will be yes, it is possible to have a try block without catch block also. Try block should be followed by either catch block or finally block. Continuing with exception handling, another important question that can come to you is what is exception propagation in Java? So suppose an exception is first thrown in the currently executing method, and if it is not caught in that specific method, it will drop down to the call stack for the previous method which has called the current method. So if it is not caught there as well under try catch block, then exception will keep on dropping to the previous method calls until it finds some catch block where it has been caught, or they are actually reaching the bottom of call stack, which can be the main method. This specific procedure of propagating the exception from currently executing method to the previous method is known as exception propagation. There is another important question related to try catch blocks, which is what is try with resources in Java? So suppose if we are writing something to a file, so in that case we may need to declare many resources like a file output stream, which we'll be using to write to the file, and then we have the responsibility to close these resources after task is complete. So till Java 1.6 we were using finally block to close all those resources which can be closed, and that has to be done manually. With Java 1.7 a feature was added which was try with resources. It ensures that each resource is closed at the end of statement of execution or the try block itself. The try with resources statement is a try statement itself that declares one or more resources which must be closed after finishing the program execution or the try block. Any object that implements auto-closable can be used as a resource in try with resources. Now let's take an example in the code itself how try with resources actually works. So this is our main class. It is having one main method, and inside that we are trying to write something on a file. So by standard try catch block, we will be using try and then straight away start with the left curly braces. But here you can see, just like another method, it is taking up an argument. So in the argument, it's nothing but the resources which we are declaring. So this is file output stream is the resource which will be used to write to the file where we want to write. And here you can see nowhere in the code we are closing this stream itself. So all these responsibilities will be taken up by the JVM itself so that no manual action is required. One of the most famous question which is being asked in Java is what is call by value and call by reference. So to answer to that will be call by value means calling a method with a parameter as a value. Whatever modification done to the parameter which is passed, that will not be reflected in the caller scope itself. So that will remain in the local context of called method. But on the other hand, call by reference means calling a method with a parameter as a reference. So reference is passed as a parameter. The modification done to the parameter which was passed are persistent and changes are reflected in the caller scope. If we talk about Java, Java uses only call by value while passing the reference variables as well. It creates a copy of references and pass them as a value to the method. Now, in the last question, let's see a small code snippet and try to find out its output. So here we have this main class. In that we have a main method and a single SOP statement. Here we are trying to print character literals JAVA and trying to concatenate with it. So if you can guess what will be the output, you can pause the video for a second. This is one of the tricky questions because straight away we will try to think it's a plus sign, so we'll try to concatenate all these characters and we'll say it will print Java on the console. But on the other hand, the output will be totally different. Let's see what will be the output. So the output for this statement will be 386. How the output of character literals can be an integer? So let's see the explanation of that as well. So as we can see, these are the character literals which are being used. These won't be concatenated because concatenation operation is not applicable in case of character literals. That is only applicable for strings. Therefore, after executing the program, an addition of each equivalent ASCII value of the character will be obtained. So what will happen? ASCII value of J will be calculated, which comes out to be 74. Then A, V and A similarly. And all those values will be added because those are integers. So all those values will be added. So in that way, output for this code will be 386. This can be very tricky question in the interview. It is very simple, yet most of us can go wrong in this. That's it for this video. So if you like the video, please do like, share and subscribe. Thanks for watching. See you next time.